welcome to the Sports Lounge, your Thomas O'Brien leader. I'm Travis Kriens, Drew Amman here to my right, along with Marcus Traxler and Charles Hildebrand.
The Charlie.
The Charlie.
Such a big show, I am actually wearing pants instead of khaki shorts today.
It's a little windy out there today.
Yeah, it's kind of
cool.
cool.
Big show.
They finally turned the heater on in the Hyper Center.
They did it. They finally did.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Lost for that. So what are we at now? 66 degrees, or are we pumping?
They balled me 50.
They got
Balmy.
the pool done?
Nope.
Okay.
Give me in 6 to 8 months. On today's show, we're going to lead off with Thomas O'Brien, former quarterback of your South Dakota State University Jackrabbit, leaves the team, announces to the team on Monday afternoon. Big story. First of all, reactions. How shocking is this to you?
Shocking. Quite shocking, really. You know, O'Brien's underperformed, but at the same time, you never thought, well, this kid's done. He's gonna call it quits. Don't think many expected it. Coaching staff didn't expect it. There's an interesting quote from Tyrell Cool in the story that we had in the Collegiate a couple days ago, where Cool said, "If you knew him well, you maybe could have seen it coming." That makes me a little interested.
And he was
in
one of those
that
guys.
detail.
Tyrell Cool.
I don't know.
He said that he did know him well, but he didn't know. Cool himself didn't know that O'Brien was going to quit. I mean, so he was kind of in that in between where he says he knows O'Brien well, but he didn't know that he was going to quit, which is understandable.
Yeah, it's interesting though that I guess I don't want to call them insiders, but insiders, close friends, could see it coming, but nobody else could. That's interesting detail, but for outsiders, a total shock.
Very surprising. I would say, I mean, and the idea that he was probably going to start this week, even though he's underperformed to this point. I didn't, for as much as we've heard about the work he's put in and all the time, and it takes a lot of time to be a starting quarterback at a Division I school, and to have this happen is quite surprising, I would have to say.
Just quickly, this doesn't happen often either.
Right.
You don't see this. You don't see starting quarterbacks at a Division I school just up and quit. This is not a common thing at all. So that's also why it's surprising.
You rarely see backups or any other players leave midseason.
Right, exactly.
Of any position, let alone the starting quarterback.
Yeah, let alone your signal caller.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I was going to say. You know, obviously it's surprising. I've seen you see times in college where, a guy fighting for a starting job loses the position like in preseason camp and leaves. I mean, that's not super surprising, but, to see a guy in the middle of the season when he's been the starter, going into his third season with experience starting, I mean, I've never seen that anywhere before where the starting quarterback just leaves.
John Stiglmeyer let the people know on his weekly radio show from Cubbies at 5 to 6 on Monday. And then, Marcus, you kind of went, tell me what happened after that and kind of who you called and what you found out.
Well, I called Coach Stiglmeyer, asked him, is it true O'Brien leaves the team? Yes. Was it his own decision? Yes. And he just said that he was really disappointed in the decision that he made, and he was disappointed for his team based on how much time he had put in. And you put a lot of time into being the starting quarterback, and for O'Brien to leave, it caught him off guard. It caught the whole team off guard. Other collegiate staff contacted Dom Clare and Cool, as Drew mentioned, and both were pretty supportive. There were other players that declined our request for comment, but certainly interesting to get the players' feedback because for them to not, I mean, they were behind him. They say they're behind him. Obviously, the Twitter thing has been huge because those guys say they're behind him. But there comes a point in time where you got to move on. I mean, is Summer your guy now or not? And you got to go now.
Yeah. Well, by all means, it seems like Summer's going to get the majority of snaps the rest of the year. But going back to Stiglmeyer mentioned the commitment that Thomas O'Brien showed and has shown up until that Cal Poly sort of massacre. That's what's surprising me is the notion that he by all means appeared committed to getting better, towards succeeding, towards having the success that is kind of expected of SDSU as a program now. To have that commitment and then just so suddenly stop that, it just makes me wonder. There's so many elements here that are at play that aren't really answered. Was O'Brien really ever that committed? I don't know how you quit a program willy-nilly if 3 days ago, I mean, you were all for it. I don't know how your emotions could change that quickly, but Maybe that's what happened. It was so sudden. Maybe that Cal Poly game was you know, the final straw basically for OBrien as far as saying, you know, this isn't worth it anymore.
And he had a good game yardage-wise, but nothing points-wise went right. You know, the pick sixes and the sliding at the one, you're short. From that standpoint, nothing went right for him, and I could see why that could be demoralizing.
Yeah, you know, just to kind of play devil's advocate like you were there, you know, when he's been struggling recently. Lots of people are against him, and then, you know, maybe he just got to I don't want to speculate. I don't know what he was thinking or what anything behind it obviously was, but, you know, I mean, if he doesn't want to do it anymore, then you're probably best looking to get somebody else in there anyways, so.
And a quote from Thomas OBrien to the Argus later in a story on Wednesday, it said, I can tell you that the decision to give it up wasn't based on outside pressure at all, and it was about his lack of desire to play. And he states after the Southern Utah game, he began to realize that football is just a game, and he wanted to move on with his life because he wasn't having fun anymore. And then John Siegelmeyer said on Monday that outside pressure did play a role. So kind of a he said, she said. What do we think about how the fans reacted and how that affected his decision?
Well, I think OBrien's going to put out this sort of veneer that, you know what, all that scrutiny, that did nothing. I think that's a natural sort of competitive fuel inside an athlete that you're not going to outrightly say, I was affected by this, I was affected by this. All this was internal. Like that's a pretty natural reaction, I think. So I'm not surprised to hear him say that. I, however, don't think it could be exactly true. I think, you know, performances and you know, being questioned by, you know, media types like us and so forth, I feel like that can sort of crack your shell a little bit. And I think that happened. I think it happened to a degree. I'm not saying that means, you know, OBrien's just is weak as far as his, you know, resiliency. I'm not necessarily saying that because that pressure can get to anybody. But I don't necessarily believe that quote. I think there's more between the lines as far as the outside influence that he had.
If anything, we did see the venom that can be thrown at a quarterback like this when he does struggle. I mean, if you read anything outside, you caught that, you know, people were not happy with him, the way he was playing. You know, there were students at the Southern Utah game who weren't happy with the way he was playing, let him know about that, not all the students. And then Dom Claire says, you know, you ran Ryan Crawford out of town, kind of doing the same thing, and that you boo your own players, or, you know. So people have noticed, I don't know if Thomas noticed, but I think Drew's right that he'd be naive to say that outside pressure didn't at least get to him. Whether or not it factored in the decision, I don't know. And we'll never know that, maybe, I don't know. But
yeah, I would imagine this is going to be kind of one of those things that, you know, other than a handful of people, no one's ever really going to know the whole story. And whether the outside factors did play a role or not, I mean, I wouldn't blame it at all for saying that. I mean, I wouldn't imagine someone would quit and then just be like, oh, well, the only reason I quit was because everyone booed me and I hated it. And I mean, that's, you know, that would be the worst thing you could say afterwards.
Yeah. Going back to that quote, he said, football is just a game, which in its purest form it is, but Division I now has this, for South Dakota State, become more than a game. And the example was given, maybe if they're playing a couple of lower FCS teams instead of an Illinois and a Cal Poly, where they win instead of lose, maybe Thomas OBrien is still on the team.
Yeah, man. A couple games where you get that ego boost, and where you bring in a Division II school, or I mean, you know, look at what NDSU does, or at least did this year, to where you know, you build up confidence in your team. I think that's a good point. The schedule playing into it.
Because if they beat Cal Poly Saturday, does he stay on the team? Since he referenced ever since Southern Utah, the opening game of the season, he's had some doubts here.
I think it's undoubtedly he's still on the team if they win Saturday. I think that's a good point to bring up. I think this is a great sort of example of, this is really the first time where I think a fan base can sort of has the opportunity to kind of reflect on really what SDSU athletics has become in the past 6, 7, 8 years. Is that it's it's far more serious. It seems like there's far more of an emphasis to succeed, and it's harder to do that. So therein you have some issues that come around with that, where you start assigning blame, and the starting quarterback is always number one in that. So I think it's an interesting case in a fan base on the Division I level, how caught up people can get in it.
I think you bring up a good point about the schedule. If instead of Illinois and Cal Poly, they were playing VMI and the Citadel, and we're 3-0 right now in all likelihood, I would assume he'd be there. With any game, there's very few. I mean, at least in my experience in life, it seems like there's very few people. And this isn't to say how good or bad OBrien was. That's another debate. But if you're truly good at any game, you're usually going to enjoy doing it. And if they were going out and they would have beat Southern Utah and rolled, two inferior FCS teams by 30 points, and everyone was talking about how great they looked, bounced back, after last year's 5 and 6 season, I think there would be a lot more, not to sound like a hippie, but there'd be a lot more happy and positive energy going around right now. Everyone would be more excited, and there wouldn't be the, kind of the vitriol there's been at times. So I think there's a good chance that, maybe he would still be here then.
We've kind of heard all about how, SDSU's D1 now, and this is either you're big time or you're not. And I think this is kind of the pressure that comes with being a fan base, that has a lot of, now expectations are higher. I think that's not a great reason for why he would quit, or that the pressure on him is justified. But I think, like Drew said, this is an example of SDSU kind of feeling that Division I status for the first time.
Austin Sumner now, it's his chance, redshirt freshman from Brandon Valley. He'll be the starting quarterback for the future. Looking at that Illinois State game, what do we expect from him?
Well, what have been the brightest things said about Sumner so far early in his career is that he has poise. He's more mobile than OBrien ever was. Not quite the arm, maybe a little more accurate. I think I have good feelings about the kid. I do. I think that poise isn't understated. I think he definitely shows this sort of natural leadership ability, I guess. I would say he's kind of been thrust into this. He caught in this whole hysteria is Sumner, where you don't know what to expect, I guess, with him. But I think he can manage the game definitely as well or better than OBrien could.
I think OBrien had poise. He didn't have it all the time. I think if Sumner can have it, most of the time, all the time, he's going to be fine. There's going to be a honeymoon period for him because he's the new guy. He's young, and he will be young even at the end of the season probably. But there's going to be a lot of pressure on him because he's taking over 3 games in. And if SDSU has any expectations of moving on any further than the 11th game this season, they need him to get going right away. Now, he's going to have the same role OBrien had, just facilitate the win. Because I don't think they're going to call plays any differently. It's just going to be, move the ball, get it in the hands of your playmakers, and let's take care of it.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I was going to say. I think offensively, philosophically, they'll do pretty much the same thing. They're going to try to set up the run, do the kind of the flare passes, do short, quick passes and play action passes. I don't think they're going to try to roll out and be SMU and throw it 60 times a game now. Now, obviously, if somehow they'd struggle early defensively and they're down 14 or 21 points, since we've talked so much about boxing recently, everyone has a game plan going into boxing, and then once you get drilled in the face once, sometimes things change a little bit. So, I think they'll go out. I'm assuming they'll have a pretty solid game plan, and hopefully it can go to form, and they can get a W against the Redbirds.
Your room to hit me ends right in front of my face. Just remember that. Okay. Good.
Conversely.
Yes, exactly.
Me and Charlie, we can't reach that far.
Well, I've got pretty long. I don't think they're that long.
No.
Tail of the tape.
Coming up next, we'll take a look at the rest of the college football weekend coming up here on the Sports Lounge. Do that again. Oh.